needle. The thunder rolled in hard and fast, the wind sounding like tires scraping the ground. The thunder clapped and shook the sky, fenders into fenders, like a television car crash played over and over, lightning sintering the air with the sound of broken glass. The rain would come in fast. Dizzy was playing in the driveway. The Friday afternoon stretched far too long, a hot, dry day without wind. The bugs were a particular irritation, to where Dizzy couldn't focus on the toy cars in the dirt. A long green station wagon turned into the driveway. It wasn't Father, the car too big and too new. Dizzy collected his cars and waited for the big car to come up the drive, where it destroyed his dirt creation with the same indolent carelessness of a horror movie monster. It stopped up to the house, waited a moment, then trundled down the drive, careful over the tree roots. When Cindy returned home from a friend's house, she grumbled about one of the other girls being mean to her over her handmade clothes. Cindy was almost in tears over it. Mother consoled her. "Your clothes are tailor-made, dear. That means the clothes are handmade. You know who else has their clothes handmade and hand-sewn? Nobody but me. Oh, the very most important people. That's not true. It is, dear. Who else has their clothes made that way? The very, very rich." Cindy narrowed her damp eyes at Mother, figuring a tall tale. Mother's seriousness was unchanged. "Really?" "Yes, really. They have their clothes made just like you." "Their mommy makes their clothes?" "No, silly. There's this fellow in a stiff little suit and tie, and a measuring tape, and a thin little mustache, and he makes measurements and cuts the fabric and stitches it all together. You have no mustache." "When I was your age, I did." "No, you didn't," Cindy giggled. "Mama, we aren't rich." "You don't have to be rich to have better things." Cindy frowned, not understanding. The other girls wouldn't understand either. One of them pointed at the noisy little car Mother drove, the old jeans she wore. One of them made fun of Dizzy when they spotted him near the end of the driveway. Of course, Dizzy deserved the sassing, but the snobbery in the other girls bothered Cindy. Cindy, braced to make better clothes than the other little girls, propped a phone book up on the chair in front of Mother's sewing machine and started play-acting making her own clothes. "I'll have sequins here on the sleeve and lace here, and then there I'll have silk here and make it all pretty." Having diligently watched Mother use the machine, Cindy found some other phone books to prop the foot switch up to where she could reach it. She found the prettiest scrap of lace out of the folds of cloth Mother had, and a long piece of polyester that looked like silk. She closed her eyes to remember what Mother did, having a better memory than her big brother. She remembered Dizzy smashing his finger with a hammer, and laughing at him as he danced round in tears, holding his own hand. She laughed. She remembered the little lever Mother pushed to make the sewing foot clamp down on the fabric, the little thing that looked like a snowshoe. With the fabric clamped down, Cindy already marveled at her mastery of the craft. Satisfied, she shifted her leg to drop her foot on the pedal switch. In 20 seconds, the house was rattled with a scream. Mother caught Cindy hunched over the machine. She hadn't expected the machine to react so fast, yanking her finger under the needle. Mother carefully backed the sewing machine so Cindy's finger was free of the needle. She held her little girl's hand. A piece of the needle had broken off. In minutes, Mother had both children packed into the small car and off to town. Storm. The thunder rolled over the sky again, as if the past hour was replaying, just like a rerun on a television. Dizzy's ears still rang with his sister's cries. The moment he saw the driveway and home, he took off as fast as he could. The car behind him was a blur, and he didn't look back. He was home, and safe, and eager to collect the missing chance he had to work on his fortress. As the rain came in, Dizzy found the small pruning shears he took from Mother's gardening box, hidden under a brick, and took after his construction with a new energy. His feet were soaked by the time he cut far enough into the briars to hide himself from the storm. The wind stirred up. The thunder still sounded as a car crash, and the noise got louder and louder. He was missing a shoe. He looked back for where it could have fallen off, but couldn't see through the rain. The thunder boomed. He turned back to his pruning. As he advanced, he found berries close by and plucked and ate them. He was hungry. His hands shook. He took his remaining shoe off and stuffed his left hand inside, pushing back the vines he cut free. He inched further and further into the briars, eating berries he found along the way, his hands growing red with berry juice. He cut himself a few times from the thorns, then a few times more. Where a child might stand and sob over a cut, he took the pain for what it was, closed his eyes, and kept going. There was a fury inside his body he never found before, to cut at the briars as if they stood in his way of the only path he had before him. Echoing in his mind was father always telling him he was too young, too small, too weak. Seeing the failed projects and broken ideas in his memory of a child exhausted because he hadn't the body to pursue his ideas, the strength of a man, he concluded his plans would be there when he grew up, waiting for him like a dear friend. He was powerful enough to ignore the thorns that pricked his shoulder and face, strong enough to keep with the pruning shears to snip the vines out of his way. The vines and thorns became the years between his weakling youth and his strong future. Obstacles. His face streamed with berry juice, his clothes stained red, his hands sore from the blisters and cuts. His last shoe slipped off his hand and was lost in the brambles. Dizzy saw a shimmer of something bright on the other side of a wall of blackberries. The ground had started sloping downward, then leveled off again. Dizzy found the briars he was cutting to be older, tougher, some of the vines dead and dried. There were vines he couldn't cut, his hands too small to have force enough on the pruners. His whole body ached. All he wanted to do was crawl into a ball and sleep, his eyes closing and opening with the same effort of opening and closing the pruner's jaws. To his shock, Dizzy uncovered a car under all the briars, held under a canopy of thorns, in a clearing of pale dirt. The dirty, chrome-framed headlights shined in the dim light, where the thick briars and the overcast sky made the ground look covered in fog. There was grass around the car, starved of moisture and sunlight, with just enough of both where the grass could partially grow. Dizzy had seen this before, a piece of plywood or board left over a patch of bare dirt, long enough to where shoots of growth germinated underneath. He'd pull the board up and see the sickly green snarls of grass, with slugs and bugs and worms. Dizzy crawled out from under his tunnel and pushed himself between the vines and the car. It was an old station wagon, with blue paint and yellow windows. It was a big car, with heavy square fenders and roof, the paint covered in a thin veil of dust and bird scat. It was a marvelous thing to find, lost in the briars, how it had stayed the test of time, how it survived the fires set that burned the blackberry vines back. Did father know such a thing existed back here? Such a magnificent thing to discover, indeed. Dizzy swiped his hand over the side of the car, brushing the dust away, and noticed the paint had metallic flakes and sparkles. Dizzy's enthusiasm drained quickly, exhaustion turning his body into a thing of pain. The rains came back, harder than before, landing through the breaks in the vines. He looked up at the sky he could see through the vine. Raindrops stung him where they landed on his cut face and arms, as if the water was acid. The car saw little weather, but the rain came just as hard. Dizzy dropped the pruners and opened the driver's door. He climbed in, closing the heavy door. The heated smell of an old attic struck him first, the musty odor of neglect and age, and the smell of rodents having lived in the car. Dizzy forced the stiff window crank, slowly rolling the window down to refresh the stale air inside the car. He sat for a moment, still amazed at the machine lost in the weeds. Had he not built his fortress, he wouldn't have discovered this amazing thing. Dizzy fell asleep, dreaming of a giant tree that reached high into the sky, beyond the clouds, the earth a rock cut in its branches.